I do think this is worth talking about, considering what's happening with like the Princess Peach game with Princess Peach Showtime and people complaining about the box art, how the movie was received, and just kind of the discourse around that. People seem to be desperate to try and portray Nintendo and their products as being woke. Right? We've seen this with Pokemon to a certain extent. I remember when Scarlet and Violet came out, the big thing that was on everyone's mind was like, oh, the game is woke. They've made all the female characters ugly. They've done this and this and this. And it simply wasn't true at all. It was a complete facade. It was a coordinated attempt by gamers, people who hate Nintendo, people who hate Pokemon, to try and discourage people from buying the Pokemon brand, right? The term woke has become so toxic that a brand being labeled as woke is a death sentence for anything that isn't like the most popular franchise in the world, right? So what we've been seeing lately is these kind of people, snoys, PC gamers, we'll call them anti-woke activists, right? Like these guys have been desperately trying to go after Nintendo to try and label them as woke. And it's really interesting to kind of see this play out because we're seeing a lot of the big thing I've always seen, and this has been true for like years, almost a decade, is like claims of censorship, right? Like the argument among these people is that Nintendo Treehouse, Nintendo's localization team, are particularly censorship happy compared to the rest of the industry, when in reality, that isn't true at all. You can barely come up with more than a handful of lines that they've changed over the years. And usually there's a very good reason for it. Like there's a very small handful of times that where I would say that like a translation is unwarranted, right? And that's usually just inserting a meme or like just not being funny or just like, there are there are things that Treehouse has done that don't work, right? Like, that's true for like any localization team for to an extent. But to say that they're more woke than the rest of the industry is like downright laughable. There's no real evidence to suggest that. And if anything, Nintendo seems to already be keeping them on a pretty short leash. There have been instances of people getting fired for extreme like woke nonsense, right? Allison Rapp, right? There has been like there has been there have been examples of like people getting in trouble for that kind of thing, and I don't expect that to change anytime soon. In fact, I think as like the pushback against woke culture becomes more and more prominent, Nintendo is not going to allow their localizers to really do anything at all. And I do think I do feel as if going forward there there is it's really odd seeing how the woke community, right, is kind of anticipating this major backlash for Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, assuming that Nintendo is going to turn Vivian into a woke icon, when in reality we don't know if that's what they're doing. That's not even if they do it, it's not going to be a big deal, right? Like I think in a lot of ways, anti woke and woke activists are just becoming as obnoxious. Like it's kind of crazy, right? Like anti woke activists and woke activists like love pretending, teaming up and pretending as if Nintendo is like the worst thing ever, right? The most conservative company and simultaneously the most woke company, right? Meanwhile, like stuff like Spider-Man 2, The Last of Us Part 2, like all of that just goes like completely ignored, right? Like all they care about is complaining about Nintendo, almost as if the entire point of all this is not to push a political agenda or to push a cause forward or to put your ideas out there. It's entirely to make Nintendo look bad, right? And there are like a handful of examples of this, right? Like just look at what people did when Nintendo slightly adjusted the box art for Princess Peach Showtime, right? Like imagine that. And there are a handful of examples of that, right? Of them doing like going nuts over something completely innocuous like that. But the woke audiences had like the Bayonetta 3 situation, right? And the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 situation, and like everything else that's been happening. Like a lot of people the woke audiences hated the ending for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, while anti-woke audiences thought the game was censored because of the costumes the characters were wearing at the beginning of the game, right? So like it's crazy that no matter what Nintendo does, certain groups of people will always pretend they're pandering to the other side and that they shouldn't be trusted. And it is honestly kind of disgusting. Honestly, like I'm past the point of like being anti woke and like criticizing the left, criticizing like these people. They don't matter anymore, right? The big issue is that people are freaking out no matter what happens. Like I dislike the anti woke community as much as the left. They are bigger grifters. They harass people. They complain about every little thing. They complain about like female characters doing anything, right? They complain about like costume decisions and localization choices and just like doing everything they possibly can to push some ridiculous narrative that Nintendo is woke and should not be supported. And of course, like I'm not just making this up. There are a handful of people I can talk about right now who have been doing this for years now, right? Who have been like accusing Nintendo of being the most woke company in the industry. But like what it amounts to really is that the discussion towards Nintendo always has to be negative, right? Every Nintendo game needs to be downplayed. Every game needs to be like ignored. Like we need to constantly just pretend as if Nintendo just isn't doing well, that nobody's playing their games, nobody likes them, nobody enjoys them anymore because they're so behind the times, right? Like like Nintendo is just the worst thing ever to a significant portion of the gaming population, right? It's a an idea that like supersedes ideology. It matters more to them than their religion, their jobs, their family life, their homes. Like they would give up everything just for the chance to like make Nintendo lose Nintendo a couple of dollars, right? Like they will do anything it takes to try and convince you that Nintendo is not a company worth supporting. And it's embarrassing. It's pathetic. It's worthless. I hope more people start acknowledging just how insane this idea actually is and just start noticing just like how ridiculous the anti-woke discourse towards Nintendo is, right? Like people will there's pretty like anti-woke does do a good job talking about like, the very few woke controversies that Nintendo does get into, like how people spurged out over like the Bayonetta thing, her having sex with a man and they have a family together, right? Like, that is a topic that deserves to be made fun of. But like generally speaking, what exactly do the anti-woke communities, the grifters, do for the Nintendo community? In my experience, they have contributed absolutely nothing of value.